Hello readers, welcome to this channel. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into this story. Eliza Hart's hand shook as she signed her name on the paper, not because she was scared, but because the pen was fancy and heavy, the kind rich people used. She had never held anything like it before. "Just there, miss," the registrar said, pointing to a blank line. And the date beside it. She wrote carefully, Eliza Hart, September 14th, 1822. Beside her stood Rowan Blackwell, the Duke of Ravensbury. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it too many times that morning. His coat was expensive but wrinkled. His eyes had dark circles under them. He signed his own name below hers, and the registrar stamped the paper with red wax. "Congratulations," the man said, though his voice was flat. "You are now legally recognized as husband and wife for the purpose of guardianship." 7 days. As requested. 7 days. 1 week. That was all this was supposed to be. Eliza tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear and glanced at Rowan. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the paper like it might catch fire. They walked out of the registrar's office into the bright afternoon sun. A black carriage waited for them on the street. The driver tipped his hat. "Thank you for doing this," Rowan said quietly as they climbed inside. "You're paying me," Eliza replied. "No need to thank me." But that wasn't entirely true. Yes, he was paying her £300, enough to clear her mother's debts and keep her little dress shop from closing. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way he'd looked when he came to her shop 3 days ago, desperate and exhausted, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket. The baby, Ada. "How is she?" Eliza asked. Rowan's jaw tightened. "Ruth says she's sleeping, finally." Ruth Penberry was the nursemaid, a round woman with kind eyes who had worked for Rowan's sister before she died. The sister, Margaret, had passed away just 2 weeks ago during childbirth. The father had died months before in a riding accident. That left baby Ada with no parents and a whole lot of people who wanted control of her inheritance. The worst of those people was Percival Gray, Margaret's uncle. He didn't care about the baby. He cared about the money and the land that came with her. And according to the law, a single man without a wife couldn't be trusted to raise a baby girl properly. So Percival had filed a petition to take custody himself. That's where Eliza came in. Rowan needed a wife on paper, just long enough for the estate solicitor to verify Margaret's will and confirm Rowan as Ada's legal guardian. After that, Eliza would go back to her shop, and Rowan would raise his niece alone. Simple, clean, 1 week. When they arrived at Ravensbury House, Eliza tried not to stare. The estate was massive, with tall white columns and windows that sparkled in the sunlight. Gardens stretched out on both sides, full of roses and trimmed hedges. She had grown up in a cramped apartment above a bakery. This place looked like a castle. Ruth met them at the door, bouncing Ada gently in her arms. The baby was awake now, her tiny fists waving in the air. "She's been fussy," Ruth said. "Wants her feeding." Eliza stepped forward without thinking. "May I?" Ruth handed the baby over, and Eliza cradled her carefully. Ada was so small, barely 8 pounds. Her eyes were dark blue, and her hair was soft as dandelion fluff. She made a little squeaking sound and rooted against Eliza's shoulder. "You're good with her," Ruth said, surprised. "I helped raise my younger brother," Eliza explained, "before he went to work at the mill." Rowan stood in the doorway, watching. His hands were in his pockets, and he looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know what to do with himself. "You should hold her," Eliza said. He hesitated. "I'm not good at it." "Neither was I at first." Come here." Reluctantly, Rowan stepped forward. Eliza showed him how to support Ada's head and keep her close to his chest. At first he held her like she might break, but then Ada yawned and snuggled against him, and something in his face softened. "She trusts you," Eliza said quietly. Rowan didn't answer. He just stared down at the baby, his throat working like he was trying not to cry. That evening, the vicar from the village came to visit. Eliza had just finished changing Ada's diaper when Ruth rushed into the nursery, her face pale. "Vicar Whitmore is downstairs," she hissed. "He wants to congratulate the new couple." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Already?" "News travels fast in small towns," Ruth said grimly. "You'd better get down there." Eliza handed Ada to Ruth and smoothed her skirt. She hadn't brought fancy clothes for this job, just 2 simple dresses and a shawl. Hopefully, the vicar wouldn't notice. Rowan was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs. He looked just as nervous as she felt. "Ready?" he whispered. "No," she admitted. "But let's go anyway." Vicar Whitmore was a cheerful man with a round belly and a booming voice. He shook Rowan's hand enthusiastically and beamed at Eliza. "My dear Duchess," he exclaimed. "What a blessing this is, and so sudden. We heard nothing of a courtship." Eliza's mind went blank. Then she felt Rowan's hand at the small of her back, warm and steady. "It was quiet," she said, slipping her arm through his. "We've known each other for some time, but with the tragedy of Margaret's passing, we thought it best to marry quickly, for Ada's sake." The vicar nodded solemnly. Of course, the child needs stability, and what better way than to have a mother's love?" Eliza smiled, even though the word mother felt like a stone in her chest. She wasn't Ada's mother, she was just pretending. But when the vicar finally left and Rowan let out a long breath of relief, Eliza realized something. Pretending was harder than she'd thought, not because she was bad at it, because it felt too real. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Eliza sat in the nursery rocking chair with Ada in her arms. The baby had been fussy for hours, refusing to settle. Eliza hummed an old lullaby her own mother used to sing, and finally Ada's eyes began to close. "You're good at that." Eliza looked up. Rowan stood in the doorway, still dressed, but with his cravat loosened. He looked exhausted. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Not really." He stepped into the room and leaned against the wall. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "It won't," Eliza said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "We just have to make it through 7 days." 7 days, he repeated. "And then what?" "Then you keep Ada, I go home, and we both move on with our lives." Rowan nodded slowly, but something in his expression told Eliza he wasn't so sure it would be that simple. "Thank you," he said again. "For this, for her." Eliza looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." After he left, Eliza sat alone in the dark, listening to Ada's soft breathing. She thought about the registrar's office, the signed paper, the 7 days stretching ahead of her. She had agreed to pretend to be a duchess for 1 week. She just hoped her heart wouldn't forget. It was all pretend. The next morning, Eliza woke to sunlight streaming through the guest room window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she heard Ada crying down the hall, and everything came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her plain blue dress and hurried to the nursery. Ruth was already there, trying to soothe the baby. "She's been at it for 20 minutes, Ruth said, looking frazzled. "I think she's hungry, but she won't take the bottle." Eliza took Ada and tried a different position, holding her more upright. After a few tries, the baby latched onto the bottle and began drinking. "How did you know to do that?" Ruth asked, amazed. "My brother had colic," Eliza explained. "Sometimes you just have to experiment." Rowan appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. His hair was still damp from washing. "Is everything all right?" "Fine now," Eliza said. She just needed a different angle. He watched them for a moment, then nodded. "Breakfast is ready downstairs. Will you join me?" Eliza hesitated. She wasn't used to formal meals. At home, she usually ate bread and cheese at her workbench while sewing. "I should stay with Ada," she said. "I'll watch her," Ruth offered. "You go on. The staff will want to meet you properly." So Eliza followed Rowan down the grand staircase to the dining room. A long table was set with more food than she'd seen in a month. Eggs, bacon, toast, jam, porridge, fresh fruit. 3 servants stood along the wall, waiting. Rowan introduced them, Mrs. Carlyle, the housekeeper, Mr. Hodge, the butler, and Betsy, the cook. "Welcome, Your Grace," Mrs. Carlyle said with a curtsy. Eliza's face went hot. "Oh, you don't have to. I mean, just Eliza is fine." Mrs. Carlyle looked confused. Rowan cleared his throat. "The Duchess prefers simplicity," he said smoothly. "But in front of visitors, we'll observe proper titles." After breakfast, Mrs. Carlyle gave Eliza a tour of the house. It was even bigger than it looked from outside. There were drawing rooms and sitting rooms and parlors, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, and a conservatory full of plants. Eliza's head spun trying to remember it all. "And this," Mrs. Carlyle said, stopping in front of a closed door, "is the music room, but it's kept locked." "Why?" Eliza asked. The housekeeper's expression grew sad. "The late Lady Margaret used to play piano. His Grace hasn't opened it since she passed." Eliza stared at the door, imagining the grief locked behind it. That afternoon, Rowan asked Eliza to come with him to the village. "We need to be seen together," he explained. "People need to believe this is real." So they took the carriage into town, with Ada bundled in Eliza's arms. The village was small and charming, with a church, a few shops, and a square where people gathered. As soon as they stepped out of the carriage, heads turned. "Your Grace!" A woman in an apron hurried over. "And the new Duchess! Oh, let me see the baby." Eliza forced a smile and tilted Ada so the woman could see. More people gathered around, offering congratulations and asking questions. Eliza answered carefully, sticking to the story they'd agreed on. Then an older man approached, his face grave. "Your Grace," he said to Rowan, "I was sorry to hear about Lady Margaret. She was a good woman." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Thank you, Mr. Porter." "And the baby," the man continued. "She's got her mother's eyes." Rowan looked like he might break. Eliza shifted Ada and gently touched Rowan's sleeve, a small gesture of support. He glanced at her, surprised, then gave a tiny nod of thanks. When they returned to the estate, Rowan was quiet. Eliza could tell the visit had cost him something. That night, Ada was fussy again. Eliza walked the nursery floor for an hour, bouncing and shushing, but nothing worked. Finally, she knocked on Rowan's study door. "I need help," she admitted. Rowan looked up from his desk, startled. "What's wrong?" "She won't settle. I think she can tell I'm not her mother." Rowan stood and followed Eliza to the nursery. He took Ada awkwardly, and the baby screamed louder. "Here," Eliza said. "Hold her against your chest like this. Now breathe slowly. Count to 4 in, 4 out." Rowan did as she said. 1 breath, 2, 3. Slowly, Ada's cries softened. By the 10th breath, she was quiet, her little fists clutching Rowan's shirt. "It worked," he whispered, amazed. "She feels your heartbeat," Eliza explained. "It calms her." They stood there together in the dim nursery, the only sound Ada's soft breathing. For a moment, it felt like they were a real family. Then Rowan spoke. "The solicitor came by today. There's a problem." Eliza's stomach sank. "What kind of problem?" Percival filed another petition. He's claiming I'm emotionally unfit to be Ada's guardian. He says I wasn't there when Margaret needed me most. That's not fair, Eliza said. It's true, though. Rowan's voice was rough. I was in London when she went into labor. By the time I got back, she was gone. I never got to say goodbye. Eliza saw the pain in his face and wished she could take it away. What do we do now? The solicitor thinks a public appearance will help. There's a harvest fair this Saturday. If people see us as a stable, happy couple, it might quiet the rumors. All right, Eliza said. Then that's what we'll do. The next day, Rowan asked Eliza why she had agreed to this arrangement. They were in the garden, watching Ada sleep in her pram. You needed help, Eliza said simply. But £300 is a lot of money to risk on a stranger's problem. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then she told him the truth. My mother died 6 months ago. She'd taken out loans to keep our apartment, and the landlord wants the money now. If I don't pay, I lose the shop. And if I lose the shop, she trailed off. I don't have anywhere else to go. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. The debt. How much is it? £240. And the shop? What do you need to keep it running? Just the rent paid up for a year, maybe £60. Rowan nodded slowly. I'll have the steward draw up the payment, £300 at the end of the week, whether this works or not. And don't argue, he added when Eliza opened her mouth. You're doing more than you were hired for. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. But you can't tell anyone. If Percival finds out I paid you, he'll claim this whole thing is a fraud. I won't say a word. That evening, Eliza wandered down the hallway and found herself in front of the locked music room. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't turn. Looking for something? She jumped. Rowan stood behind her, holding Ada. I was just curious, Eliza admitted. Mrs. Carlyle said your sister used to play. Rowan's expression darkened. She did. Did you play too? He hesitated. Then, to her surprise, he pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. The room was beautiful. A grand piano sat in the center, covered with a white sheet. Bookshelves lined the walls, and tall windows let in the moonlight. On top of the piano sat a small tin whistle. Margaret gave me that when I was 7, Rowan said quietly. She tried to teach me to play, but I was terrible at it. He picked up the whistle and turned it over in his hands. I should have been here when she needed me. I should have been here. You didn't know, Eliza said gently. I should have. He set the whistle down and looked at her. I was in London arguing about tenant rights. Important work, I thought, but it wasn't more important than her. Eliza didn't know what to say, so she just stood there with him in the quiet room, letting him grieve. Finally, Rowan locked the door again and handed Ada to Eliza. We should practice, he said. Practice what? Looking like a married couple, for the fair. So they stood together in the hallway, and Eliza practiced touching his arm the way a wife might. Rowan practiced standing close without looking stiff. It felt strange and awkward and a little sad, but it also felt like they were learning the same language. We can do this, Eliza said. Rowan nodded. 7 days. 7 days, she agreed. But deep down, both of them were starting to wonder if 7 days would be enough. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze. The harvest fair was set up in the village square with booths selling pies and jams, games for children, and a puppet show under a striped tent. Eliza dressed carefully in her nicest dress, a soft gray with white trim. Ruth helped her pin her hair up, and Rowan tied Ada into a cloth sling across Eliza's chest so her hands would be free. You look nervous, Ruth observed. I am, Eliza admitted. What if people can tell we're pretending? Then you smile and keep walking. That's what ladies do. When they arrived at the fair, people turned to stare. Rowan offered Eliza his arm, and they walked slowly through the crowd. He greeted tenants by name, asked about their families, and listened when they talked about their farms. Eliza was surprised by how much he cared. At the bread booth, an old woman pressed a loaf into Eliza's hands. "For the baby," she said, "fresh baked this morning." "Thank you," Eliza said, touched. They watched the puppet show, bought honey cakes, and let Ada nap against Eliza's chest. For a little while, it almost felt normal, like they really were a family. Then a man with a camera approached. "Your Grace," he called. "Might I take a photograph for the county paper?" Rowan tensed. "I don't think—" "Please," the man insisted. "It would mean so much to the community. A picture of the Duke and Duchess with the new baby." Eliza looked at Rowan. They both knew this could help their case. Proof that they were a stable, loving couple. "All right," Rowan said. They posed in front of a flower cart. Rowan stood behind Eliza with his hand on her shoulder. She held Ada carefully, and the baby stirred, making a soft sound. Without thinking, Eliza bent and kissed Ada's forehead, and Rowan, watching her, rested his cheek gently against her temple. The camera flashed. For a moment, they stayed like that, frozen. Then Eliza realized what had happened. That wasn't posed. That was real. She stepped away quickly, her face hot. "Got it," the photographer said cheerfully. "This will be in Tuesday's edition." As he walked away, a voice spoke behind them. How touching. Eliza's blood went cold. She turned to see a tall man in an expensive coat, his smile sharp as a knife. Percival Gray. "Uncle Percival," Rowan said coldly. "Your Grace." Percival's eyes slid to Eliza. "And the lovely new Duchess, though I hear she's not really a Duchess at all." Eliza's heart pounded. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Percival's smile widened. "I have a letter from your former landlord. It says you were living alone and unmarried just 2 weeks ago. So unless you had a secret wedding in your dress shop, this whole thing is a lie." Rowan stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Careful." "Or what?" Percival laughed. "You'll challenge me to a duel? Please, I've already filed the letter with the magistrate. By Monday everyone will know the truth. And then Ada will be mine." He tipped his hat and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Eliza felt sick. He knows. "It doesn't matter," Rowan said, but his voice was shaking. "We'll figure it out." "How? If he has proof, we'll figure it out," Rowan repeated. But Eliza could see the fear in his eyes. That night, back at the estate, Rowan paced the library while Eliza sat on the sofa. Ada was asleep upstairs with Ruth. "I'll tell the magistrate the truth," Rowan said. "I'll say I misled you, that you didn't know it was wrong. That way, you won't be punished." "And you'll lose Ada," Eliza said. "Better than you losing your shop and your reputation." "No," Eliza stood. "I agreed to this. I signed the paper. I'm not letting you take all the blame." "Eliza?" "I mean it." She crossed her arms. "We're in this together." Rowan stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "Because it's the right thing to do." "That's not a reason." Eliza hesitated. Then she told him the truth. "Because I know what it's like to be alone. After my mother died, I had no one. I worked every day, barely making enough to eat. And I thought, is this all there is? Just surviving?" She looked down at her hands. "But then you came to my shop with Ada, and you looked so desperate and so scared. And I thought, maybe I can help. Maybe I can do something that matters." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough. "I should have been there, when Margaret went into labor. I was in London negotiating with Parliament about housing for tenant farmers. I thought I was doing something important. But when the message came that she was in trouble, I rode for 2 days straight, and I still didn't make it in time." "That's not your fault," Eliza said. "It feels like it is." He sat down heavily in a chair. "She wrote me a letter before she died. The midwife gave it to me. She said she forgave me, but I can't forgive myself." Eliza wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort. But she didn't know if she was allowed. "Margaret wanted you to have Ada," she said instead. "That means she trusted you, even at the end." Rowan covered his face with his hands. For a minute, Eliza thought he might cry, but then he took a deep breath and looked up. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me the truth about yourself." "You told me yours," Eliza said. They sat together in the quiet library, the fire crackling in the hearth. Outside, the moon was rising, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Eliza felt like they weren't just pretending anymore. They were building something real. But that scared her more than anything. On Monday morning, the newspaper arrived. Rowan opened it at the breakfast table, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Eliza asked. He turned the paper around. There, on the front page, was the photograph from the fair. Below it, a headline read, "Duke and Duchess of Ravensbury. Welcome new ward with love and grace." It was a beautiful picture. Ada looked peaceful. Eliza looked like a real mother, and Rowan looked like a man who cared deeply for both of them. But beneath the article was a smaller headline. "Questions raised about marriage legitimacy." Eliza's stomach dropped. The article explained that an anonymous source had provided evidence suggesting the Duke's marriage might not be legal. A hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning at the magistrate's office to verify the affidavit. "It's over," Rowan said quietly. "No." Eliza stood up. "We still have time." "Time for what? Percival has proof?" "Then we tell the truth." Eliza's mind raced. "We explain that the marriage affidavit was legal because the registrar approved it. We show that Ada is healthy and safe. We prove that you're a good guardian." "That won't be enough." "It has to be." Eliza found Ruth and asked her to come to the hearing as a witness. Then she tracked down Mr. Hawthorne, the estate solicitor, and explained her plan. "It's risky," Mr. Hawthorne said, "but it might work. If we focus on the child's welfare instead of the marriage itself, we might convince the magistrate." "Then that's what we'll do," Eliza said. Tuesday morning arrived too quickly. Eliza dressed in her best clothes and braided her hair tightly. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Rowan met her in the foyer. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But let's go anyway." The magistrate's office was small and stuffy, with wooden benches and a high desk where the magistrate sat. Percival was already there, looking smug. The magistrate, an old man with white whiskers, banged his gavel. "We're here to verify the marriage affidavit of Rowan Blackwell, Duke of Ravensbury, and Eliza Hart. Mr. Gray has submitted evidence suggesting the affidavit may be fraudulent." Percival stood. "Your Honor, I have a letter from Mrs. Dawson, the landlord of Miss Hart's former residence. She states that Miss Hart was living alone and unmarried as recently as 2 weeks ago." The magistrate looked at Eliza. "Is this true?" Eliza stood, her legs shaking. "Yes, Your Honor." Rowan started to speak, but Eliza shot him a look. She needed to do this herself. "I was unmarried 2 weeks ago," she continued. "But the Duke and I signed a legal affidavit in good faith. We did it because Ada, the Duke's niece, needed stability. She'd just lost both parents. She needed a household that could care for her properly." "So you admit the marriage is a sham," Percival said. "I admit that it started as a temporary arrangement," Eliza said carefully. "But the affidavit was legal. The registrar approved it, and Ada has been safe and healthy ever since." The magistrate frowned. "That's not the question. The question is whether you misrepresented yourselves." "Your Honor," Mr. Hawthorne stood. "May I call a witness?" Ruth took the stand. She explained how she'd cared for Ada since birth and how much the baby had improved since Eliza arrived. "The house is calmer now," Ruth said. "His Grace was struggling alone, but with Miss Hart, or rather, Her Grace, Ada has routine. She's gaining weight. She's content. That's what matters, isn't it? The child?" The magistrate considered this. Then he looked at Rowan. "Your Grace, why were you not present when your sister went into labor?" Rowan stood, his voice steady. "I was in London, working on legislation to improve tenant housing. It was important work, but I should have been here. I failed my sister. I can't change that, but I can make sure I don't fail Ada." "And what have you done to ensure her welfare?" "I've hired a full-time nursemaid. I've had the nursery repaired and stocked with everything she needs. I've met with the estate steward to make sure the tenants are cared for so I can spend more time at home. And I've asked Miss Hart to help me learn how to be a proper guardian." The magistrate turned to Eliza. "And you, Miss Hart, why did you agree to this arrangement?" Eliza took a breath. "Because I know what it's like to be alone, and I didn't want Ada to feel that way." The magistrate was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "I find that the affidavit was entered legally and in good faith. The guardianship will remain with the Duke of Ravensbury, subject to monthly review. However," he added sternly, "any future evidence of fraud will result in the child being placed with Mr. Gray. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rowan said. Percival looked furious. "This is outrageous. They lied." "The hearing is closed," the magistrate said, banging his gavel. Outside the courthouse, Eliza leaned against the wall, her legs weak with relief. "We did it," she whispered. Rowan stood beside her, his hands in his pockets. "You did it. You saved her." Eliza looked at him. "We saved her. Together." For a moment they just stood there, the weight of what they'd done settling over them. Then Rowan spoke, his voice quiet. "Tomorrow is the 7th day." "I know," Eliza said. "You'll go back to your shop." That was the deal. Rowan nodded, but he didn't look happy, and neither did Eliza. On the morning of the 7th day, Eliza packed her small bag. She folded her 2 dresses carefully and tucked in her hairbrush and the book she'd been reading. Everything fit easily. She hadn't brought much. She wrote a receipt for the £300 Rowan had promised her and left it on the nursery table. Then she went to say goodbye to Ada. The baby was awake, waving her tiny fists. Eliza picked her up and held her close, breathing in that sweet baby smell. "You be good," she whispered, "and grow up strong." Ada grabbed Eliza's finger and wouldn't let go. "I think she knows," Ruth said quietly from the doorway. "Knows what?" "That you're leaving." Eliza's throat tightened. "She'll forget me." "Maybe, but you won't forget her." Downstairs, Rowan was waiting in the foyer. He looked tired and sad, and when he saw Eliza with her bag, something in his face broke. "You're really going," he said. "That was the deal." "I know, but—" He stopped. "Can we talk? In the library?" Eliza followed him to the quiet room where they'd spent so many late nights planning and worrying. Rowan closed the door and turned to face her. "I don't want you to go," he said. Eliza's heart stuttered. "Rowan? Not as part of the deal, not as a pretend wife, but as yourself." He took a step closer. "These 7 days, I've seen who you are. You're kind and brave and good with Ada. You're honest even when it's hard, and I—" He stopped like the words were stuck. "I don't want to lose you." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay, but not in a cottage somewhere, pretending. I want to do this right. A real courtship, inside the house so we can both care for Ada, but with clear boundaries. You keep your independence. You run your shop. We take our time and figure this out together." "And if it doesn't work," Eliza asked, "then we'll deal with that when we come to it. But I have to try. Because this week, pretending to be your husband was the realest thing I've felt in years." Eliza looked at him, this man who had been a stranger 7 days ago. Now he felt like someone she'd known her whole life. "I want that too," she admitted, "but I can't give up my shop. It's all I have." "You don't have to. I'll hire you to make clothes for the estate. The staff needs new uniforms anyway, and you can use one of the outbuildings as a workshop." "And Ada?" "We'll raise her together, equal partners. You set the schedule, and I'll follow it." Eliza bit her lip. "This is crazy." "I know. People will talk." "Let them." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the gold ring he'd given her on the first day. She'd worn it all week, and now it felt strange to take it off. "I'm returning this," she said, holding it out. Rowan's face fell. "Oh." "Because," Eliza continued, "if we're doing this right, we should choose it again, when we're both ready. Not because we have to, but because we want to." Rowan's expression shifted from sadness to hope. "You mean, I'll stay, but in a cottage on the grounds, like you said, and we'll take our time, and if someday we decide this is real, then we'll do it properly." Rowan took the ring and placed it carefully on the piano in the corner of the library. "Then it'll wait here, for both of us." Eliza smiled, and for the first time in days, it felt like she could breathe. "There's one more thing," she said. "The music room. I think you should open it." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to do it alone." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled the key from his pocket and led her down the hallway. His hand shook as he unlocked the door. The room still smelled like dust and old memories. Rowan walked to the piano and lifted the sheet covering it. The wood underneath was dark and polished. Beautiful. He picked up the tin whistle and turned it over in his hands. "Margaret was 12 when she gave this to me," he said quietly. "I was 7. I couldn't make a single good sound with it. She laughed, but not in a mean way. She just thought it was funny how hard I was trying." "Do you remember how to play?" Eliza asked. "I was never good at it." "That's not what I asked." Rowan lifted the whistle to his lips and blew 3 soft, halting notes. They weren't perfect. They wobbled and cracked. But they were something. Eliza didn't laugh. She just stood beside him, listening. "She'd like that," Eliza said. "You think so?" "I know so." From upstairs they heard Ada start to cry. Not a scared cry, just an awake cry. The kind that said she wanted attention. "I'll get her," Rowan said, setting the whistle down. "We'll both get her," Eliza corrected. They climbed the stairs together, and Ruth met them at the nursery door with Ada in her arms. The baby was red-faced and fussy, her little fists waving. "She wants her people," Ruth said, smiling. Rowan took Ada carefully, and Eliza stood close, showing him how to bounce gently. Slowly, the baby settled, her cries fading to whimpers and then to silence. "See," Eliza said, "you're getting good at this." "We're getting good at this," Rowan corrected. Over the next few days they settled into a new rhythm. Eliza moved into the small cottage at the edge of the estate grounds. It had 2 rooms, a fireplace, and windows that looked out over the gardens. Rowan had it cleaned and furnished simply, the way she liked. Every morning Eliza walked to the main house to help with Ada's feeding and care. She showed Rowan how to change diapers, how to tell the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry, how to read to the baby, even though she couldn't understand the words yet. "It's about the sound of your voice," Eliza explained. "She just wants to know you're there." In the afternoons, Eliza worked in the new workshop Rowan had set up for her in one of the outbuildings. The estate steward brought her measurements for new staff uniforms, and she got to work cutting and sewing. It felt good to have her hands busy, to create something useful. Sometimes Rowan would stop by, carrying Ada in the sling, and watch her work. "You make it look easy," he said one day. "It's not easy. It's just practice." She held up a half-finished jacket. "Like everything else." In the evenings they had dinner together, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with Ruth or Mr. Hawthorne. They talked about the estate, about Ada's progress, about the village. Slowly, they were learning each other's rhythms, the way married people do, but without the pressure of pretending. One night, 2 weeks after the hearing, Rowan asked Eliza to walk with him in the garden. The moon was full, and the roses smelled sweet. "I've been thinking," he said as they walked, "about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "The magistrate said monthly reviews, which means Percival could challenge us again at any time." Eliza's stomach tightened. "Do you think he will?" "I think he'll wait for us to make a mistake, and then he'll pounce." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Eliza spoke. "So we don't make mistakes. We keep doing what we're doing. We take care of Ada. We build a life, and we show everyone that she's exactly where she belongs." Rowan stopped walking and turned to face her. "And what about us? Where do we belong?" It was a bold question, and Eliza's heart raced. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I think we're figuring it out." Rowan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I think so too." Another month passed. Ada grew bigger and started smiling, her whole face lighting up when she saw familiar faces. The estate staff grew used to seeing Eliza around, and the village accepted her as part of the Duke's household, even if the details were a bit unusual. Percival stayed quiet, but Eliza knew he was watching, waiting. One afternoon, Eliza was working in her shop when Rowan appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." He stepped inside and closed the door. "I need to ask you something." Eliza set down her sewing. "What is it?" "The magistrate sent word. The next review is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, and he wants to see both of us, together, as a family." "That's good, isn't it? It means Ada's doing well." "It is good, but—" Rowan hesitated. "I want to go to the registrar first, before the review." Eliza's breath caught. "Why?" "Because I want to make this real, not for the magistrate, not for Percival, but for us." He pulled the gold ring from his pocket, the same ring she'd returned to him. "You said we'd choose this again when we were both ready." "I'm ready, Eliza. Are you?" Eliza looked at the ring, then at Rowan. She thought about the past 2 months. The way they'd learned to work together, to trust each other, to build something real out of something that had started as pretend. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm ready." 2 weeks later, they stood in the registrar's office again. The same desk, the same heavy pen. But this time, everything was different. "Are you both entering this marriage of your own free will?" the registrar asked. "Yes," Rowan said. "Yes," Eliza said. They signed their names, and the registrar stamped the paper with red wax. "Congratulations," he said, and this time his voice was warm. "You are now legally married." Outside, the sun was shining. Rowan took Eliza's hand, and she squeezed back. No pretending, no performance, just 2 people choosing each other. At the magistrate's review the next week, they brought Ada with them. She was dressed in a white gown Eliza had made, with tiny embroidered flowers on the collar. The magistrate looked over his notes. "I see the household is stable, the child is healthy, and you've remarried." He looked up. "Properly this time." "Yes, Your Honor," Rowan said. "Then I see no reason to continue these reviews. The guardianship is permanent. Congratulations." Outside the courthouse, Eliza felt like she could finally breathe. It was over. Ada was safe. They were safe. Percival was standing by his carriage watching them. For a moment Eliza thought he might say something cruel, but then he just tipped his hat and climbed inside, defeated. That evening, back at Ravensbury House, Eliza sat in the music room with Ada on her lap. Rowan was at the piano, playing simple notes on the tin whistle. "You're getting better," Eliza said. "Only because you keep making me practice." Ada reached for the whistle, and Rowan let her hold it. She put it in her mouth and made a wet, squeaky sound. "A natural musician," Rowan said, laughing. Eliza laughed too, and the sound filled the room that had been locked for so long. Later, when Ada was asleep in her crib and the house was quiet, Eliza and Rowan sat together in the library. The fire crackled and rain pattered softly against the windows. "Do you ever think about how this started?" Rowan asked. "That first day in the registrar's office?" "All the time," Eliza admitted. "I was so desperate. I would have done anything to keep Ada." "I know." "But I never expected this." He reached for her hand. "I never expected you." Eliza smiled. "I never expected you either." They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined. Outside, the rain grew heavier, but inside they were warm and safe. "Thank you," Rowan said quietly. "For what?" "For pretending, and then for staying." Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for asking me to." Upstairs, Ada stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. In the music room, the tin whistle sat on the piano, waiting for the next time someone was brave enough to play it. And in the library, two people who had started as strangers sat together, building a life that had begun with a lie but had grown into something true. Pretending to be the Duke's wife for 1 week had changed everything. It had taught Eliza that she was braver than she thought, that she deserved more than just surviving, that love could grow in unexpected places with unexpected people. It had taught Rowan that grief didn't have to be locked away, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that family wasn't just blood, it was choice. And it had given Ada a home, not a perfect one, but a real one, full of people who loved her and would fight for her no matter what. The week had ended, but the life they'd built together was just beginning, and this time there was no pretending at all.